Hey everyone, this is Kevin from the chesswebsite.com, and today we're going to be looking at the Falkbeer Countergambit. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is going to be the first YouTube analysis video on the Falkbeer Countergambit. So I think it's going to be pretty good. I've been playing this defense exclusively for the past week, trying to get more insight into it. So I think this video is going to be very informative for everyone that watches it. The Falkbeer Countergambit starts with white to e4, black responding pawn to e5, and white going into the King's Gambit line. Now I can tell you, being a King's Gambit player myself, I really hate seeing the Falkbeer Countergambit. Anytime a player plays the King's Gambit, they really want to be the aggressor in the game. They really want to attack early and often, and the Falkbeer Countergambit, which is pawn to d5, pretty much takes away all the main lines that white's used to playing in the King's Gambit line. And it really gets them out of their comfort zone. And today we're going to be looking at all the different moves that white has that you may see. We're going to look at the main line, and we're going to look at how to exploit any mistakes that you may see. And if you are white, how to respond correctly, and what both sides should be thinking when they see this. Now white has a lot of places that he can hang himself, and so I want to go over those to make sure that if you do see him, you can take advantage right away. The first one, the most obvious, is if pawn captures to e5. A lot of times white just gets flustered, they're not really sure which pawn to capture. If he captures pawn e5, we can simply bring our queen to h4, just a devastating move. If he tries to block with his pawn here, we can simply take on e4, and we're forking this rook, checking the king here. If he decides to move his king instead, we can just simply bring our queen, capture on e4. His only move is king to f2. We can simply bring our bishop to c5 check. He can either move his king, or he can try something like pawn to d4. We can just recapture because our queen's protecting. So if he wants to give us this queen, either way, black's going to win this game fairly easy. So that's obviously going to be a very bad move, as we can see. Another move you'll see often is simply knight to c3. Now from here we're simply going to take pawn to f4. Now white has two options here to take this pawn on d5, and you want to make sure that if they take it with the wrong piece, that you make them pay. Most people like to capture with their pawn. They don't like to extend their minor pieces too far out in the game. Well, this is actually going to be a mistake for white if he does that, meaning that if he captures with his pawn on d5, thinking that his knight's protecting, we can actually bring our queen to h4 again, check the king. Again, white has two options. He can move his king into the middle, which completely out of safety, or he can simply bring his pawn to g3, and we can retake with no room for white to recapture, because then we can simply just take his rook on h1. So that's going to be the wrong way, but it's going to be the more tempting way for white to recapture. Now if white does capture with his knight, which he should, black can simply come to f6 with his knight, and then white's just going to take on f4. Now we can come in and develop our knight to c6. We eventually want to take on this pawn on e4, but right away, again, it is a counter gambit, so we are giving up a pawn at the very beginning. We're trying to get a spatial advantage and center control faster than white by giving up that extra pawn at the beginning. So I like to have both, in the Falkbeer Countergambit, both the knights out right away, and then depending on where he goes, you can develop and attack from there. So make sure that if he doesn't defend correctly, that you make him pay. Now another defense that you'll see quite often is simply knight to f3. Obviously this is the most common line in the King's Gambit line, so if a player really doesn't know what to do, they may simply just continue with their line and not really pay much attention to it. From here we can simply just capture on f4, and then white really has to decide how he wants to defend here. If he captures with pawn to d5, we can simply develop our knight to f6, attacking this pawn on d5. And white's has two options. Obviously he wants to defend this. He can defend it one with knight to c3, but from here we can simply take freely, as you can see. If he takes, then we can retake with our queen. Obviously if he tries to bring his bishop into the act, we can do the same thing. We can capture, and if he captures we can recapture, and we have great center control here. Or you may see him bring his pawn to c4. Now if you see this is just a really bad move, because he's basically already weakened his king side, and now he's weakening his queen side even more. From here we can simply bring our pawn to c6, attacking this piece, trying to basically mix this up. If he does recapture, then we can simply recapture with our knight on c6, developing and bringing it to a very good square. And you can see from here, black has a pretty good setup. We can bring our bishop into the action, we can castle kingside. White is completely flustered. His king side is weak, his queen side is weak. Black's going to have a really good game here, and that's kind of what you're looking for in the Falkbeer Countergambit. It may not be the most technically sound, but it gives you a lot of fighting options, and it plays really well, especially against someone that's not used to playing against it. So that is one of the more common things that you'll see. Another thing you may see is they may just challenge with pawn to d3. Obviously this is going to be a huge mistake, because we can take, and then when they recapture, then we can simply take their queen on d1, and when they retake with their king, we're going to be in great position. Their king can no longer castle. Obviously we can just recapture this pawn here. We're going to be even in material, but at the same time we're going to have a much better game, because their king is in the center and he can't castle, and we can still develop our pieces freely. So if you see d3 right away, that's going to be a mistake for them. We'll go ahead and get into the main line though, and that is simply pawn captures d5. And from here, and again, if you're white and you see this, this is going to be your best move. Just go ahead and take the pawn that they are offering you, and move forward with the game. From here, black's actually going to just push forward with pawn to e4. And this is actually a really powerful move by black. So white really wants to remove this pawn on e4. And you may see two ways. The most common is simply just d3. But you may see knight to c3. It doesn't matter which one. If you're black, you're going to respond the same way, and that's knight to f6, putting a defender on this e4 pawn. Now if they continue the point and bring a pawn to d3, well, now you can actually develop even more pieces, and you're going to be pinning the knight down to the king here. Now let's say he captures with his pawn. Black's going to recapture, and you can already see the tension that's building. We're attacking this piece, and at the same time we're pinning it down to the king. White's really going to have a weak queenside attack once we're done with him. But let's say he doesn't bring out his knight. Let's say his first move is simply just pawn to d3. From here, we're just going to bring our knight into the action with knight to f6, and the most common move in the main line is simply white recaptures on e4, and then black's going to capture on e4 with his knight. And this is the setup that you're going to see more times than not, and this is the part that I really want to look at. White's really got a pretty bad setup as far as center control and kingside safety. He really doesn't have any of that. So this is, as you can see, we're down a pawn. We have 2 pawns down and they're down 1. So we are down a pawn, but we have pretty good control. And from here, white can still make a lot of mistakes. Obviously, anytime you're up in material you want to trade down, you may see a common mistake of, let's say, knight to c3, attacking this knight, basically trying to remove it since it is in a good square. White can't attack it with any pawns, so it can just kind of hang out there. We can even bring our bishop to f5 and put another defender on that. The knight's not going anywhere for a while, so white may try to get rid of it. From here, though, we have a pretty awesome move. As y'all seen before, the queen just eyes on this h4 spot, and it's a pretty devastating move. Obviously, the king can move, or they can bring the pawn to g3. If he moves his king out, his king's going to be even more unsafe than he was before. If he does move his pawn out, then we can simply take our knight, get him away from danger from the knight on c3, and we can just capture. If white here recaptures, we're going to get a free rook out of it. So even from this position, which you'll see a lot in the main line, if someone has studied it, you're still going to have a lot of fighting options. And white, against the Falkbeer Countergambit, has many ways to hang himself. So this is the Falkbeer Countergambit. If you haven't already played it, I highly recommend it. It's fun. If you like to attack in like very fast-paced games, especially as black, and you do come across the King's Gambit, I highly recommend this. So hope you guys learned as much from this video as I have. If you haven't already, please subscribe. I've got some other cool videos coming out in the future, and I'll see you guys next video. Thanks for watching.